Behind the thousands of AI systems performing tasks in split seconds are what are known as microchips. Companies like NVIDIA have built a trillion-dollar business around the production of these microchips. In fact, Bloomberg News calls NVIDIA's chips the workhorse of training AI models. Here in Nigeria, a company has taken up the challenge to put Africa on the map of this global microchip production, and they are doing it with talent here on the continent. Come along as we take you into the future of the microchip industry, which is being built in Africa.
Hello and welcome to Tech into the Future, where we talk about everything that's happening in tech and how it affects you. My name is Timiwa Aladikomo. I'm the CEO of Tech Cabal, a digital publication that's been covering African tech for the last decade.
And I am Ngozi Madrikadozie. I look after Android partnerships for West Africa at Google. Alongside Tomiwa, I will be your guide into the world of technology in Nigeria, Africa, and the world. Here are the global tech headlines. OpenAI is being sued by 8 newspapers in the United States. On Tuesday, a group of newspapers, including the New York Daily News and the Chicago Tribune, sued both Microsoft and OpenAI in a New York federal court, accusing them of misusing reporters' work to train their generative artificial intelligence systems. The lawsuit said Microsoft and OpenAI's systems reproduce the newspaper's copyrighted content verbatim when prompted, while ChatGPT hallucinates articles attributed to the newspaper that harms their reputation.
Coming to Africa, NASDAQ-listed Swivel swings to profitability with $3.1 million in net profit in 2023. Swivel is a mobility startup that's listed on the NASDAQ Tech Exchange. It posted its first full-year net profit in 2023. It's a strong reversal in fortune for the company, which posted a net loss of $123.6 million in 2022. Swivel is born in Dubai and operates in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, but Egypt is its largest market. Swivel has had a turbulent ride since listing on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, and investors will certainly be pleased to see a tech company that operates primarily in Africa headed in the right direction. It's an important signal for other African tech companies looking to list.
Indeed, very much so. Staying in Africa, Twiga Foods hires Jumia Kenya's Charles Ballard as new CEO. The move comes 4 months after the abrupt resignation of founder and CEO Peter Nyogo. Twiga is a B2B e-commerce startup founded in 2014 based out of Kenya. Many have considered Nyogo's exit to have been driven by investors. The company suffered operational problems that delayed payments to suppliers and staff, layoffs, and a legal dispute over $450,000 cloud bill, which was eventually settled out of court. Nyogo also resigned from the company's board, handing control to investors who had injected more than $150 million in debt and equity since 2017.
Still in Kenya, Kenya and the continent actually. So Bupass acquires QuickBus. Bupass is a Kenyan travel booking platform backed by Founders Factory Africa and Front End Vectors. This week, it announced the acquisition of its Nigeria and South Africa-based competitor QuickBus, which is a bus ticketing platform. The acquisition combines 2 businesses with different strengths: Bupass, which has a partnership with Kenya's financial super app M-Pesa, and QuickBus, which has existing integration with major distribution channels in Nigeria and South Africa, such as Vodafone's VodaPay app in South Africa. Bupass users can now access international routes across 16 African countries, including Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, Malawi, Nigeria, and Ghana. Major routes such as Johannesburg to Cape Town and Durban to Cape Town can be found on the platform today, with more to be added by the end of Q2.
Bringing it back home, the CBN directs 4 fintechs to stop onboarding new customers. Kuda Bank, MoneyPoint, OPay, and PalmPay have paused account opening for new customers following a directive from the Central Bank of Nigeria. The directive has come 2 days after the EFCC has blocked 1,146 bank accounts involved in unauthorized forex dealings.
I have to say that the regulatory environment for fintechs is quite tough.
It is.
So if it's not the CBN, it's the SEC. If it's not, and it's
FCC,
there's definitely a lot of work for them to
everybody.
do to ensure that, as an industry, they're understood by the regulators, and that the regulators are sort of able to allow them to innovate in ways that are productive.
So it's very tough, and I wonder if it's too tough, right? I think this is now the time for a lot of advocacy and a lot of co-creating of policies, right? There needs to be a lot of shaking of hands between the private and the public sector.
Because what you have is an industry that's really sort of like innovating, that's pushing us forward on a number of fronts, where you have a regulator that's quite cautious. You also have established sort of competitors that are not really excited about having the fintechs eating their lunch. So,
Indeed.
Yeah, a lot of work for them to do, for the tech industry to do on that front. Yeah.
That was the headlines. Stay tuned with us on Tech into the Future on Arise News.
Welcome back to Tech into the Future. Our focus today is on the growing demand for semiconductor microchips to power AI systems and the opportunities for Nigeria and Africa to be a meaningful part of this critical tech sector of the global tech scene.
Today's guest is a technology entrepreneur who has lived in Lagos for nearly 2 decades. He is currently the Group Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Netcom Africa. He serves as a board member of ChipLab, an African company bridging the talent gap in the semiconductor industry and unlocking Africa's youthful potential. Welcome, Choi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So let me ask you, tell me, what brought you to Nigeria almost 2 decades ago, and what keeps you here?
Well, it's been a long time, but it just seems like yesterday. I'm still learning about how things work. But prior to coming here, I was in Hong Kong. I was running a satellite communications company, a global satellite communications company that was predominantly focusing on emerging markets, and was quite successful. So at that young age, I wanted to expand. So myself and my business partner, we wanted to set up a telecoms business in Africa. The country called Africa.
Of course.
Yes. So, didn't know where. So first flight was to South Africa.
Okay.
Beautiful country.
Indeed.
It wasn't what I was expecting in terms of, quote, Africa. But also it was highly regulated in terms of telecommunications.
Right.
So we left and we went to Kinshasa.
Okay.
That was a surprise.
Different from South Africa?
Very different. Language is different.
Yes.
I did my school in Canada. I studied 12 years of French, but what I remember is very little. And so we checked out the place. It was a bit rough, middle of a war. So we left and we went to Accra.
Okay.
Seemed perfect. This is what I thought Africa should be. Based on the little bit of information that was out there on the internet.
Right.
But after looking deeper into it, the population was quite small.
Yes.
And we came to Nigeria, and it was like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Too big, too small, and just right. Right. So Nigeria had that vibrant energy, the growth, the ambition of the people, and the large population size. And this is where the telecommunications business started.
I love it.
Fantastic. So let's talk specifically about ChipLab, because today's conversation is really about sort of the microchip industry and like what's going on there. So what's the backstory on that? Sort of at what point did you switch from telco to chips? And how'd you get into that?
Okay, well, chips is actually software.
Yeah.
All software runs on chips, and in order to make chips, you use a software to make chips, to design it. Just like you would use a software like AutoCAD to design a building.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I met my business partner in California at a supermarket. Yes.
Okay.
And I asked him, so what are you into? What do you do?
Shopping for chips?
I think he was carrying a bag of chips. I don't know. We were talking about different chips. But I asked, what do you do? And he said, he designs chips at Intel. And my brain just went like, how do you design a chip, especially like Intel?
Yeah.
And so he explained to me how it's done. We spent many days talking about it, and I was starting to learn more about it. And he continued his career from Intel. Then he went to OneWeb, which is a satellite company. Then he joined Boeing in the space and satellite defense area for developing chips and developing that program there. And we said, his name's Ola Fadira. I said, Ola, let's find a way for you to come back to Nigeria. He's Nigerian.
Okay.
He left
Ola Fadira.
He left Nigeria. At his early age, he was number one in mathematics, number one in physics in the country, in Africa. He was a very brilliant individual, and he grew his career. So we talked, and so we came up with the idea of the chip industry is an industry which is a bit opaque. Mm-hmm. Not many people know about it. The software industry, we all know somebody who's a software developer.
Yeah.
But how many chip designers do we know? Not many.
Very few.
But the entire world depends on chips. There's chips in every electronics device, every appliance, everywhere. Mm-hmm. And as we saw during the pandemic, the shortage of chips
really
created a situation where
prices up.
It changed the world.
Indeed, yes.
Okay. And then we had the AI revolution. Mm-hmm. So 2024 has started. We're going to look back upon this year and say 2024 is when it all started.
Yeah.
AI works on chips. AI needs chips. The better the chips, the faster we can do AI. Mm-hmm. Okay? Every device uses chips. Your phone, your smartwatches, everything uses chips. In order for that technology to develop, it's not just software, but software needs to be run on better hardware. And that's the concept.
Okay.
Fantastic. Okay, so the global microchip market is expected to reach somewhere around $157 billion by 2030, according to Precedence Research, with North America leading the way. What is the business case for setting up a microchip company in Nigeria?
Okay. Building a building is similar business as building a microchip. So you have to design it like an architect, and you need someone to validate it. And then you now get your plans and you give it to a construction company who's now going to construct it. So I just talked about building a building, but actually building a chip is very similar. So you design the chip, you verify and make sure the design works, and then you get the design and you send it to a construction company, which is called a fab. And the largest fabs in the world, Taiwan, for example, TSMC, they will now make the chip and you use the chip into the device that you need to use. Okay, so a fab is a very complicated, huge business. One fab is probably the size of Victoria Island and Ikoyi combined.
Oh, wow.
Okay, it's very high tech.
Huge.
Yes, but what we're focusing on is the design work of those chips.
And so you can do that from Nigeria. The talent, what's required, all of that's present here.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about who you're selling to. So who are the people, when you design a chip, who do you then sell that to? Or
So our clients are international electronics microchip companies. They would design, have a plan for a large chip or a small chip. If it's a large chip, we can now design a portion of it. Okay, if it's a small chip, we can design that entire chip. But what I think is more important is, why are we doing this? So, I've lived in Nigeria 20 years, and I've seen the country grow, have a few challenges, but always comes out ahead. And, there's been a drive recently with what they call internally generated revenue. Okay, it's good. It's a good concept, but basically it's Nigeria the government getting more revenue from the people who are, at the current time, struggling a bit.
Yes.
Okay, so the other option is, how can we get foreign money into the country? We have to sell products, we have to sell goods, we have to sell resources. Oil is a good thing to sell.
Indeed.
Solid minerals is another good thing to sell. But that industry is held, it's not easily accessible to just anybody.
Indeed.
Right now.
Yeah.
So most people that I've known, and especially a lot of my employees, have actually taken that into their own hands by exporting themselves.
Of course, yeah.
Yes, and we call that japa.
Yes.
So they're exporting themselves. So
Right.
in fact, the country's capability is decreasing.
Shrinking.
And it's not sustainable. So the third option is, can we export as a country knowledge? So if we export knowledge, the individual stays within the country.
Yep.
It's like a chicken that consistently lays eggs. Don't export the chicken, export the eggs. And that's what we're doing is we are training bright individuals to learn the skills, to design and develop microchips so that knowledge can be exported. And our customers are going to be predominantly foreign companies.
Excellent. Do you already have those customers? Like, do you have a large customer base, existing customer
Our customer base is growing.
Yeah.
So we've got customers who are developing, for example, electronic vehicles. We have customers who are developing IoT devices, small devices. We work with many partnerships. So the semiconductor industry is not one that we're just in alone. It's all about partnerships. So we've got partnerships with development software companies, partnerships with chip development environments, partnerships with educational institutions, partnerships with universities. We've partnered with University of Ife, OAU Ife, Unilag, and we're gathering the brightest students there to now upskill them in an accelerated program to get those skills to be able to enter the workforce.
So remind me, in the process, in the value chain, you talked about design, validating, and then fab.
Yes.
Do you do all three here in Nigeria?
We'll do the first two.
The first two.
The first two.
Design and validate.
Yes.
Design and
the fab
validate.
it's a very sophisticated equipment.
So zooming out a little bit, how are you navigating the regulatory and infrastructural challenges of building a business like this in Nigeria?
Well, Nigeria is a very easy place
Is it?
to start a business.
Okay, tell
Yes.
us, please. I'm very interested in this.
You have to apply for the right documents, your corporate CAC documents, make sure you're filed with the taxes, you do all that stuff, and you can start a business.
Yes.
And get the appropriate regulatory approvals that are needed for the industry that you're in. The second is the facility. There's a lot of workspaces in the country, co-working spaces. There's a lot of offices you can rent. A new business, I don't recommend someone to buy a generator and do
Fair
all
enough.
of that yet. But
Operating costs,
if you're starting out with 10, 20, 50 people, there's many co-working spaces that you can take up a dedicated space and focus on your actual deliverable of your business instead of the infrastructure challenges that exist within the country.
Interesting.
Fantastic. Just talking, let's shift gears a little bit. So there's kind of a big BPO elements to this, business process outsourcing elements to this. How do you think about just African countries competing globally in this BPO space?
I think African countries are the best position to compete in the global space. Primary reason, one of the first is language. Right? English being a predominantly spoken language in the majority of the world is the language of communication. And also, let's call it the dialect or the accent of the language is very compatible with Europe and North America, where most of the business comes from. Next is, I've seen by just my experience that everywhere I go outside of Nigeria and I meet top professionals in every sector, there's a high probability that they're Nigerian. So my theory is, or my just through correlation is, the people in this country, in Nigeria, are extreme learners, can learn anything very fast. And that's what makes me proud to say I've been living in this country for 20 years.
Fantastic.
So one of the criticisms from Nigerians in general is that the Digital Economy Ministry is putting the cart before the horse by chasing AI and moonshot programs instead of solving more foundational issues like power. What is your thinking about this case about building moonshot businesses and solutions?
I like it, right? Because we all have to have a goal. A
Right.
big goal, a direction, a North Star that we're going to.
Yeah.
And yes, there are issues, right? I have solar in my house because I'm tired of running my gen.
Indeed.
Okay? I've solved that. But to make a chip, to design a chip, to work on these moonshot projects, what do you need actually to get it done? You need people, you need a workspace, you need a computer, and you need electricity for your computer. Those are not that difficult to attain.
Those are solvable problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the result of that great brain work can achieve a big step towards those moonshots. And when we get there, those people who have been on that journey will start contributing back to this country.
Yep.
And I'm not saying through obligation of any sort. People change jobs.
Yes.
Our associates, after a few years, may resign. And what will they do? They will do what they do best. What's been good for them is microchip design. They may even set up their own design firm.
Yep. So you then start to, the next question was going to be about how we create more sort of market-making innovations. And this is a market-making innovation because Nigeria as a chip design factory is not something that it's been known for. So I guess the broader question is, how do we get more people chasing moonshots? How do we get more people sort of building really innovative businesses in this market?
Well, the global trend right now is there's a huge excitement on microchips, right? And the U.S. has launched the CHIPS Act. There's many countries who have launched similar acts with not billions and not tens of billions, but hundreds of billions of dollars, which is hundreds of trillions of naira behind these programs to really push them and accelerate them. And so to really build that excitement, as I said, all parts of that ecosystem need to benefit, and it has to be done quite rapidly. So the jobs coming in, the associates getting better income, better life, and now, in Nigeria, if you start having a better life, you buy a nice car, your friends are going to ask you, hey, what do you do? I'm a chip designer, okay?
Yeah.
So initially, our chip designers are very educated people,
Right.
the top of the top. And that's not a fair representation of the entire populace of the country.
Yeah.
So we are also doing what's called vocationalizing the chip industry.
Gotcha.
I like that.
So, for example, somebody who's working at Tesla in making one of the most modern cars may not understand all the intricacies of renewable energy and those high-tech areas.
Right.
They vocationalized parts of it. So for us working on a chip, we're going to get a high school graduate, put them through a program
Right.
so they can now enter the industry and work on areas that are not as requiring a higher level of education. That's our goal.
Fantastic. So I'm trying to get a good sense of what's possible here. So if you can share some numbers with us, what is the projected number of microchips you expect to produce by the end of this year, for example, and how has that grown over the past years?
How many microchips have been produced?
No. So ChipLab.
Oh.
Yeah, like.
Yes,
So
ChipLab, yes.
some volumes or some sense of like how big you
Like
intend
how
to be.
big, yes.
So we don't produce the chips.
You
We
design.
design the plans for the chips. It's for our clients to now say, please make.
Send it to TSMC and say
Please
make
that.
it or
Correct,
whatever it
correct.
is.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in terms of another metric is how many projects.
Okay.
Fair enough.
How many
Okay.
chips, different chips can we design? I think in this year we should be working on at least 10 to 15 projects. Okay. Next year we want to be on 100 to 200 projects. Okay. Each project requires a team which consists of engineers or associates that we've trained, plus senior experienced project leaders.
Okay.
Okay. So there's this kind of learning through experience as well from someone who's been in that industry.
I guess any final words on the market and again the places where we should be pushing for innovation. So chips is a clear place. There's a lot of work happening in there. Beyond that, what other areas would you say, especially in an AI-driven world, we should be focusing on? See innovation focused
Yes.
on. Yeah.
I've been in technology now for almost 2.5, 3 decades now, and one thing I've realized is it's not about the technology. It's about the value that it creates.
Okay.
And in our semiconductor venture, it's about the final goal is how do we increase the GDP of the country? How do we export things, knowledge, products, whatever it may be, and create jobs? And so whatever initiatives are happening, for example, AI, how is that going to be productized and create businesses within the country that can now grow and prosper, just like we do in the chip industry?
Thank you so very much for joining us, Yen. It's been fantastic to have you here today. We look forward to having you back and to keeping track of all the great work you do at ChipLab.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Don't go anywhere. This is Tech into the Future on Arise News.
thank you for staying with us at Tech Into the Future on Arise News, where we just had quite the interview with Mr. Yen Choi. Tell me, what were your thoughts about that interview?
I thought really amazing work. So it's great to see high-level innovation in process in Nigeria.
Yes.
So that's really, that's the kind of thing that makes you optimistic about the country. And I think it's it's actually a really good lead-in to the conversations around AI and are we moving too fast? I like his optimism. We should be doing moonshot projects. We should be doing amazing, ambitious things because the world is not waiting for us. And he's showing us how to do it.
Exactly. I think that is the how. I'm super pumped about this interview, or like just about the idea behind it, because it's one thing for us to have these big moonshot projects, but if you don't, it's like anything else. It's like you can have a big idea, but then how do you execute it? Like how do you how to practicalize it? What does that really mean? And so here, if you break down the idea of a microchip, which in my wildest dreams I would never think we would be making here. Not that we're designing and validating.
We're designing it,
But
you wouldn't think that any of the value chain was happening here in Nigeria.
Because I just wouldn't think that we would have not even just the talent, maybe the infrastructure or the know-how, the capacity, the capability.
Well, he broke it down.
Here, when you break it down, you make a problem so much easier to choose. Like you can't eat an elephant. You have to small you eat an elephant. There's a proverb that says. So I think,
bite.
Bite. I think that is the thing. So yes, I know it always sounds very intimidating, but I think the value here is in breaking it down and then seeing what bits we can do. And
I think it's a really important lesson here, because you could do this across a number of industries,
you sure can.
Across a number of value chains. He said, you have to design the chip, you have to validate the chip. Then you've got to manufacture it. Okay, we're not going to build any fabs here anytime soon. We don't have the precision engineering that's required, or the level of investment and all of that, and the necessity of power. But to design and validate the chip, you need a laptop.
Exactly.
You need, a few smart people. You just give them some training, and he's happy to give them the training, 6 months of education.
Again, it's by breaking the problem down small, right? So when you break it down to the lowest entry, like actually there's availability for, you can participate in this big thing even at this level, but it's the breaking down of that big problem. And I'm hoping that the three MTTs are doing something along this kind of level, right? Because the truth is, it's not about the technology. Right, it's about the value that it adds. It's about the value that it creates.
And where in the value chain you can fit in.
You can fit in.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic point. And when I have spoken with the people driving the 3MTT program, they've definitely talked about building for different skill levels.
Right.
And so training people so that they have a basic of technical talent to do low-level work, and then taking the best of those people and sort of growing them so that they can do higher-level work. But it is important that even people who are going to be at the relatively base level are able to participate in sort of like the global value chain for technology. So really important. I think great interview, very optimism-inducing, and I'm looking forward to having more people who are actually building these things in Nigeria on the show.
Indeed.
If that's you should call us.
You should, yes, exactly. We would like to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today on Tech Into the Future. I am Ngozi Madrika-Dozie.
And I'm Tomiwa Ladikomo. Join us next time as we take you into the business and impact of tech in Africa, how it's changing the world, and how it's changing your world. Stay tuned on Arise News.